Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Ushanka Show where everyone can learn something new about life in the Soviet Union. My name is Sergei Sputnikov and back in 1971 I was born in the USSR. In today's video I'll tell you another story about my mother's childhood. So once again, my mother Elena was born in 1948, so she's kind of like a Soviet baby boomer. And now, since she's in Kiev and we can FaceTime each other, she started filling up those gaps that I didn't know about. Or, when you're a kid, you don't really care about your mother's childhood. You're mostly interested, like grandpa's stories about war. But anyway, she told me an extremely interesting story about her doing babysitting for her cousin Alexander or Sasha back when she was 10 years old. If you follow my channel, you may recall that my mother had an older brother, Mikhail or Misha, who was born in 1930, so there was 18 years difference between my mom and her brother. So in 1958, when my mother turned 10, Uncle Misha was already married and they just had a kid named Alexander or Sasha. So Uncle Misha, his wife Anya, and their newborn son lived in Kiev, while my mom, of course, lived with her parents in the northern Ukraine, 250 kilometers away from Kiev. And now let's talk about maternity leave in the Soviet Union. I probably need to make a separate video because the law changed over the years and it was gradually improving for the Soviet women, but usually it was 9 months paid maternity leave, so 6 months before birth and 3 months after. And then Soviet mothers were allowed to stay and take care of the baby up to 1 year. When your kid turns 1 year old, you're supposed to turn it over to the daycare or kindergarten, nursery, and you have to start to work. It was against the law to stay with your child and not to work after baby turns 1 year old. So because of the big difference in age between my uncle and my mom, 18 years, we had this kind of silly situation when my mother became an aunt at the age of 10. But of course, if you look at this photo of my mother holding her nephew, it looks more like a brother and sister, right? And this situation repeated again with my brother and myself, because I was 15 when my brother was born, and for quite a long time, a lot of people thought I was just an extremely young father taking care of my own child. But my uncle and his wife had a problem. Sasha was almost 1 year old, and they still were waiting for a spot at the local kindergarten. So this is one thing I didn't know about it. I knew a lot about waiting lists, but I didn't know there was also waiting lists to get into the kindergartens. So my aunt Anya was about to go back to work and they couldn't find a spot in the kindergarten nearby. So decision was made to bring for the summer my mom from the village, because she had no school during the summer break, and she would babysit her baby nephew for the entire summer, stay in Kiev and take care of the baby while both parents, my uncle Misha and my aunt Anya, would be working. So my mother had to spend the entire summer of 1958 in Kiev babysitting her baby nephew, and she mentioned that she is really surprised that she never got into car accident, well, not a car accident, but being hit by a car, because every day she had to cross the busy street carrying baby nephew, because the baby food was across the street, so she had to go there and get it and then bring him back. So yeah, it sounds extremely challenging, right? And of course I need to mention that my uncle at that time, they lived in a small one-room apartment. So there was Uncle Misha, Aunt Anya, baby Sasha, and my mom. And I'm not sure if my aunt's niece also lived in there. I made a separate video about that situation, but Aunt Anya came to Kiev to take care of her niece whose parents died in a car accident, and then they managed to send off niece to the orphanage house, and they occupied that apartment. And later on, that girl, when she turned 18, somebody told her that, hey, you can take your apartment back, and through the court she kicked out her aunt and my uncle Misha, her relatives, and reoccupied that apartment. but that's a different story. And in September, my mom had to go back to the village. I mean, I don't know about had to go. She was probably more than happy to go back to the village because she had to go back to school. She was only 10 years old, so that's third grade, starting the fourth grade. And later on, when she finished school in the village, she came back to Kiev and stayed for a while with her brother, my uncle Misha, before she found an option to live in a kindergarten where she worked. So she worked as a nanny, and then as a little bonus, she was allowed to stay there overnight to sleep because she had no housing options. Pretty wild story, right? I had to take care of my own brother too because we were 15 years apart. But at least I was 15, so that was kind of, I guess, easier to take care of the baby than when you're 10. And this is what my mom had to go through because there was a shortage of spots in the kindergartens, and I betcha because of the baby boomers' babies. So a lot of young villagers were coming to the large cities, and they were marrying, having kids. So there was a severe acute shortage of just for the capacity of the kindergartens in Kiev and other large cities. Okay, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this story, and if you did, please don't forget to like this video, maybe share with your friends, and we'll talk to you soon. До побачення, goodbye.